Hello, dear people of Facebook. This is Jem coming to you from the United Kingdom, and hopefully we have audio today. I'm here with Jessie James Beads on Facebook to talk about Across the Pond. If you haven't seen the strand before, I'm going to drop you down to the other screen so that you can have a look at both the strand and what we're going to make up today. So let's just pop you down there, and I'll just hope to hear from you. There'll be a little bit of a wave if you can see and hear me okay. That's what we're going to be working with today. Let's have a look and see if anybody is with me, because you know how it goes. Sometimes yes and sometimes no. So this is the strand that we're going to be working at today. You have got Chichi glass, faceted glass, rhinestone beads. The feature for me are these giant, really huge beads of green agate. Now, agate is a hugely varied gemstone. Sometimes you will have swooshes, sometimes you'll have bands and rivers, and sometimes you'll get this dragon vein. Let me just hold that up a little bit so the light can flow through it. You get this dragon veining to it. And you can see beautiful spider webs or scale-like inclusions within the gem. So it's a gorgeous gemstone, and it is available in the UK and in the United States. So from the UK, we ship all over United Kingdom plus into Europe. Let's have a look and see if anybody is going to give me a quick wave. We have hellos. Teresa is in. Robin is in from Tempe in Arizona. Janine is in, hi to you. We've got Christine in Ohio. Catherine in California. Christine is sending love to us all, which is always wonderful. Susan is in. You're in Southern California, I want to say, Susan, sorry. And Jessica is in. Huggles to you too, sweetheart. I hope that you have all had a good day thus far. This is Across the Pond. So called because it's available your side and my side of the water. From our UK housing, our beads will ship out all the way across UK and into Europe. Sharon is giving us a wave. Thank you. Nazette is in Trinidad and Tobago. How absolutely wonderful. What a beautiful part of the world. Hello from Lisa. Hello from Bonnie in Surprise, Arizona. I bet you get that a lot, and apologies, doesn't mean to be offensive. Celia is in from sunny Lancashire. I hope you're having a sunny day, my darling. My sister's been sending photographs of sunsets in Lancashire from Morecambe. They've been really beautiful, so I hope that all is well with everyone today. This is our gorgeous strand for the day. Our bead strand is called Across the Pond. I have popped a link into the video description which tells you where you can find this strand if you are so inspired to make one of your own. Now, I've made an asymmetric, leaf-inspired, spring into summer colours pendant. You could make that into wall art instead if you wanted to. I've also got a little bonus pair of earrings, and all of these pieces are still available from the strand. So you get a pendant, I've got some earrings, and I've still got these babies to work with as well. So let me bring that strand back in for you to have another look at. Gail is in from Wyoming. Debbie is excited to catch a live. Hey from GA. Else is in from Belgium. Good afternoon to you, my darling. I go there during spring training. Lovely little city. That's Janine talking of Surprise in Arizona. Well, it's lovely to have your company, my dear sweet people. Shall we talk about what wire we're going to use? Shall I leave you on that, or do you want me to say hello? I'm just going to pop my face up for a second. If we haven't met before, my name is Jem. I come from and live in England. I work primarily in wire, and I use a lot of beads, a lot of gemstones, and a lot of swooshing and smoothing of the wire to get it functional. If you're afraid of wire work, hopefully this will allay some of those fears. It is accessible to people who are a little bit newer to wire work. However, it's a beautiful project to improve your wire work if you have already had a bit of a start. We're going to be working with 18 gauge round wire today. As ever, I'll be working with my raw copper because it shows up beautifully on the screen. The wire I've created the pieces on the board is a medium temper silver coloured wire. has copper at the heart of the metal, and it is in 18 gauge round. That's a medium temper that I've created the pieces with. I'll be showing you with a softer raw copper just because it shows up so beautifully on camera. So let's drop you back down to the board to have another look at what we're going to be making. Sharon is in from Oregon. Thank you for hopping in and joining us today. So across the pond, available both sides of the big sloppery Atlantic, I want to say. Do you know what? I'm not really very good at geography. Must be the Atlantic, I'm sure it is. There we go. So we've got a couple of huge agates. We have got a really lovely collection of beads. Hello, says Linda from the Adirondacks. And if I've got that right, I will be incredibly impressed with myself because I'm a bit rubbish, really. Always manage to mispronounce somebody's name or somebody's city location. So we're going to pick one of these. Doesn't really matter which one, the design will look beautiful, whatever the type of agate you've received on your strand. We've also got some really funky beads to work with as well. And I'll show you at the end how to make a nice little pair of earrings. Now they're tricky to see in the dish, so if I lift that up, you'll see it's going to match in really beautifully with your pendant piece. I adore these faceted rondelles. They've got something of a smoky topaz flavour to them. They are faceted glass and they are stunning. I'm just going to clear the board slightly before we get stuck into our tutorial for the day. So I've got another dish to bring in to pop all of these beautiful beads into. And I'm just going to cut away the end here, supporting that so it doesn't fall. Now, these silver colour beads that sit at the end of all of our bead strands, sometimes you get one, sometimes you get two, are perfectly useful little beads, and I always keep these in a giant pot to make jewellery with. Really, really nice to have something that is free, basically. So I'm going to unspool, or unleash, I suppose. Free the beads, free the beads. Also, if I am making to sell, I will often keep the little tag so I know exactly what the strand was called. Sometimes I'll work that into the name of the piece when I come to sell it. So the tools that I'm working with today will be my flush cutters. I'm going to be working with my bent chain nose pliers, but you could also use standard chain nose pliers. They will work the same. The reason I use the bent ones is because I can put the pliers underneath the wire and you'll be able to see slightly better what's happening. I've also got a pair of very inexpensive round nose pliers to work with as well. These three things are basically your requirements for working with wire. Beyond that, and it's a bit of an extra. So I'm just going to pop the beads into the corner so you can see everything you get on the strand, and then we're going to take a quick look around our pendant today. So I struggled for a long time with making things that were asymmetrical. So I forced myself, and now I love asymmetric designs. The wire we're going to work with is 18 gauge round, and it's 2 pieces of wire. So let's find the reel, and I'm going to unspool a good length to begin with. I would say probably about 15 inches or so to begin with. I'm just going to give that a little bit of a warm through to start off before I cut that from the reel. Trying not to throw it on the floor, obviously. So if you are brand new to wire, your first experience with wire will be greatly, greatly enhanced if you warm the wire through first before you start using it. So what I tend to do is grab a hold of the very end with any flat facing pair of pliers. It could be your chain nose, it could be your bent chain nose, it could be standard flat pliers. And I'm just going to give that a really good grip with my dominant hand, and then thumb and forefinger of the non-dominant hand, and I'll just swoosh that all the way along, and I'll do that 2 or 3 times. What this does is gets all of those lovely copper electrons excited. It makes the wire warm to the touch, for one thing. And you've just watched me, I've run that between thumb and forefinger 3 or 4 times only. When I pop that on the back of my hand, I can feel the temperature has risen dramatically. Now, it's not burning me because it's only the warmth of my own body that I'm using. And that's something that I want to impress upon you. You don't have to have a flamethrower to make metal your friend. So we've warmed our wire through. What we're going to do is start by making this attractive little leaf shape down at the bottom. And this will repeat repeat later on if we get time to make those earrings. Elaine is in, hi to you also, my lovely. So I'm just going to add a little bit of extra warmth to the last 3 or 4 inches or so. And I'm going to come in, let's go 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches. I think probably 3 inches from one end. Maybe 3.5 to err on the side of caution. I'm going to pop my pliers in underneath and just turn a bit of a 45-degree angle. So we've got our wire travelling along, coming out now at 45 degrees. So what I want to do is smooth a lovely arc shape around. And I'm just using, you could use the tip of my finger. If you have false nails or very long nails, you might prefer to use the side of your thumb. My nails are at a stage in my life that they are functional and not there for prettiness. So apologies, they should be clean, but that's about all I can say for them. So we've got a little bit of an arc on the bottom of our design so far. What I want to do now is turn a little bit of an angle on the very end of that wire out to the side, and that just gives me an opportunity to see if I'm happy with the shape that I've created. What I want to do now is make that arc just a little bit deeper. And if you imagine, this is the long tail of wire travelling away inside of the palm of my hand. I'm just holding that steady. And then you've got the shorter tail of wire out on my dominant side. And I'm just going to create a small shape down at the bottom. So if I put those pliers in just past the angle we've just made and push that wire back up in the same direction it came from, it's not completely tight on itself. And we do want to try and keep that as if it's between 2 panes of glass. So if you pop it down to the board, it needs to be reasonably flat. Doesn't matter if it sticks up a bit, because you can simply just give it a tiny, tiny squish. Get that to sit where you want it to. So what I want to do now is replicate the distance between this small angle and the tip. Now I like to think of these as lemon shapes. So if you have tuned in part the way through and you think, what is Jem going on about today? I'm talking about lemon shapes. It's this kind of shape. It reminds me of a lemon. So if I pop those pliers in again and then push outwards and away, what we've got is a little bit of an extra rounded bit just down at the base, and it reminds me of the end of a lemon. I do like a cocktail now and again, so I look at lemons. So what we want to do now is to replicate the arc that we made on the first side. So we made this lovely swooshing around shape just coming around, and then we've got this little extra bit on the bottom. So now what we want to do is turn the design around if it's easier for you. I'm going to use my finger again just to generate extra heat. This is the little trick I want to show you with wire. If you really do give that a lovely warm, you don't even need to use a mandrel or your finger to create that shape. You can take the tail of the wire over and it will arc for you. That's something that comes with a little bit of practice, but heating your wire with just your body heat is key. Now, you can overwork your wire. If you were to spend 4 hours solid just going backwards and forwards on that length of wire, it would be too much and it would get very, very sad and probably break. So we're looking to warm that through 3 or 4 times. You can do that again 3 or 4 times later if you need to. So we're going to take the shorter tail of wire around the longer tail of wire in a little bit of a neck. If we imagine that's the neck of a pendant and this lemon shape is our pendant down at the bottom, one of the easiest ways to keep this shape intact, if I turn that back into the correct orientation, is just to hold the shorter swoosh of wire like so. If I tilt that on its side, you'll see that my pliers are just holding that upright just now, where it crosses over the first angle that we made. If I keep that in position, I can bring the short tail of the wire down, and what we're looking to do is to keep this distance and this distance as equal as possible. It's very easy when you're working with wire and you're taking the shorter tail of wire into a little coil around the neck of the design. It's very easy for this side to get shortened and you end up with quite a wonky looking, in this instance it's supposed to be a leaf. It could be a lemon, you could be designing it for some other reason and you want to keep those sizes the same. So now I've got a little angle just where it crosses over the neck of the piece, and I want to support that angle like so. And I'm going to push the tail of wire, the short tail of wire, all the way around and underneath. So if I just show that up to the camera, whoops, without hitting the camera would be helpful, but there you go, this is me and we know I'm going to do it at some point. We've made a bit of a return. The wire has gone around the neck and it's coming back on itself. So once you know that you're happy with that little lemon or leaf shape, hello Missy from Alaska, what we're going to do is now continue to wrap this shorter tail of wire around the neck. To do this without foreshortening this second side here, we need to be able to control this quite strongly. One of the ways that we can do this is to use some flat facing pliers. I'm going to do this left-handed now for a laugh. And what I'm doing is I'm gripping just the lemon or the leaf shape. I'm not pressing down hard anywhere wire crosses over. I'm only supporting here and here, just across those two unconnected pieces of wire. What I can then do is hold this very, very firmly and take that tail all the way round 1.5 times, 2 times. There we go. So if I release the pliers, it's very strange to me to hold them in my left hand. It's not a skill set that I have. We've tied a little knot around the neck of the design. And what we've created is a nice, safe, solid shape. Now, if you want to add a little bit of work hardening, because we obviously warmed this quite a lot earlier, you can open and close the flat surfaces of your pliers over those wires, and I'll show you that now. Now you can probably hear the clunking. Temmie's in from North Carolina. Hello to you, lovely. The noise is part of what hardens the wire. The firmness is another part of what hardens the wire. Now, if you're looking to keep a plated or a coated wire intact, you'll need to be gentle. And in that instance, the repetition of opening and closing gently will harden the wire. If, like me, you're working in a solid metal, this is all copper, there's no coating, then I tend to be a little bit, I'll just open and close the pliers and everything will be fine. The next thing that we want to do is to create this beautiful vein or swooshing or tendril effect down at the base of the design. If I just pop this up into its final orientation, you'll see how we're doing. So what we're going to do now is create this swooshing, almost like an S shape, I suppose. It's a beautiful fluid shape to work with, and it appears quite a lot in nature. So I'm going to super warm this end section. This is the short tail of wire that we're working with now. Debbie says, love watching you work. That's so sweet of you. Thank you very much. So I'm super warming this because I want the wire to work for me. I want the wire to be kind, and I want it to give me lovely fluid shapes. If you're aggressive with cold wire, you'll end up with what we lovingly refer to in my part of the world as janky shapes. And that's just unattractive, not very nice. Janky. I don't even know if it's a real word, to be honest with you. I'm just going to tighten up those coils very, very slightly with the very tips of my pliers, and then I'm going to draw. Can you see the wire is coming across downwards like so? So I'm going to pinch the nexus where we just did that little bit of coiling. I'm going to draw the wire back across, and because we superheated it, we've got this lovely fluid swoosh. I want that to come back in the opposite direction now, so I'm going to pinch the assembly quite firmly while I draw the tail of the wire around and back and over the top. Now you can make a very small loop, you can have a very large loop, it doesn't really matter, it's entirely up to you. If you need to make it slightly smaller, you can just turn it around. What I want to happen is for this tail of wire to be cut away and for it to truncate so that the cut end will sit adjacent to the swoosh just here. So what I'm going to do is turn the assembly around again, use the flush side of my cutters, and just hold that in position over the top. I really genuinely have no clue where that went. It's long gone. I'll have to be very careful as I'm barefoot today. So you can see we've got that very flush cut end. Let me put my finger underneath. Hopefully you can see that. And I want to locate that so that it sits against the swoosh of wire where it comes from. You can just lift that up slightly and away. So I've just drawn that very gently forwards. And what I'm going to do is give that a really good hardening. Because it sits in a slightly vulnerable position on the design, I want it to be strong. So I'm going to give that a little bit of a working with the flat surfaces of my pliers before pushing it down into position. Now, something I played with before bringing this design to air was opening up that loop. And because we've got some gold in our beads, some yellow and gold colourways, I thought it would be fun to have this. It's a scrap of chain reaction. Genuinely don't ask me what number chain reaction it was because I have no idea. So I'll just show you on the sample piece that you can open up that tiny little loop that we've just created down at the bottom, pop in a chain reaction. This is not something that you have to do. It's something that you can do if you want to. And then you can close that loop up exactly as you would a jump ring. And it's just a fun way to accentuate and extend the design. You don't have to do that at all. It's just something I wanted to show you because it was on my mind before I came live with you today. So that is an option if you fancy that. So let's continue making our main focal pendant now. So we've got this long tail of wire coming away from our beautiful lemon with a leaf. I don't know what you'd call it. You call it what you want it. I'm going to call it the leaf design down at the base. So I just want to one time run my thumb and forefinger over that wire to get it a little bit more straight. What I'm going to do is grab one of the spare beads. These are an agate. This looks like a dragon's vein. Hopefully the camera will allow you to see the beautiful markings that you get. It's going to get slightly blurry as I bring it up to the camera because the focal length is set for the table, but you can see the veining in the gemstone. So I love working with Jessie James beads because they are beautiful, amazing and quality, but I also love working with genuine gemstones because every time you get one, it's a different treat for you. So I adore working with all of the Jessie James bead strands, but it's a special treat when they send me one with a gemstone on. I love it. Hopefully, coming up at the beginning of August, we've got something extra special for you on that front. So we're going to the cut end, where there is no lemony leaf design, and we're going to introduce our giant supersize agate onto that design. Now, if you're concerned about working with wire and gemstones, I'm always suggesting caution when working with gem beads because they tend to be slightly more fracture ability than certainly working with metal beads or resin beads. What I would say is agate is an amazing gemstone to work with because it's really sturdy. Obviously don't jump up and down on it, that would be rude. So what I'm going to do is hold on to the leafy end of my design. I'm going to have the swoosh at the top as opposed to the table side. It's on the top side. Doesn't really matter if it twists around because you can simply give it a bit of a yoink when you want to. What we're going to do now is create a little wrapped loop up at the top. So what I would always say is treat all of your beads, whether they be crystal or metal or glass or whatever it is you're working with, just give them a bit of respect and all will be well. So what I'm going to do is cautiously use my pliers to hold a little space away from that agate bead and create an upright bend, and I'm just going to do that. It'll come towards the camera and look really weird for a moment, and then I'll turn it sideways and it'll all make sense. So the bead's going to spin freely at the moment, which is absolutely fine. We're going to trap it in a little while. So what we're going to do next is to create a wrapped loop. Now I made a reasonably small loop in this one. I think I might add this into a design which features more beads, which means I could use a beading thread up the centre. I just made a piece over the weekend for a local lady, and this is the one I was using, the 7 strand. There's also a 49 strand, and you know, beading thread, plentiful choices, whatever you've got to hand. So you might want to make a small loop up at the top if you're going to add this into another design. If it's a standalone piece, you may need to use a larger object to create that loop shape. I'm going to grab my multi-step bail makers because I love them. If you don't have these, you can use the base of your round nose pliers, or you could indeed use a pen. Let me show you the non-branded side. I often use objects that are near to me when I'm making jewellery. If I don't have to get up and go rooting around for things, then all the better, I can get more done. So I would use the soft end of this pen in question and just wrap around that. But as I have my bail makers, the 2-stage bail makers are also a well worthwhile investment. So I'm going to make quite a large loop on this one just so I've got choices for later. I'm going to grip up at the neck of the design there. I think I'm going for step number 5. I'm going to rotate the pliers around. Obviously they've just caught on the camera. So what I tend to do when I'm making wrapped loops, certainly with people who are newer to wire work, is I will make the first half a semicircle first, pop those pliers back in, again on the same shape, and then draw that tail of wire all the way around. Now if I withdraw the bail makers, it'll be much easier for you to see what's happening. I've made a round shape basically in that wire, which I'm now going to support firmly. So you can play around with the size of your aperture or your bail as and when you need to. So I'm then going to draw that tail all the way around, and I'm going to put a little bit of tension on this now and just draw the tail of the wire all the way around until it sits neatly. So I'm going to bring one more time across the front. We're going to have a look at the design so far. So what I will say at this juncture is, hello to you, Rachel, thanks for joining us. My leafy lemony shape down at the bottom is flat to the table. My bail at the top is at 90 degrees to the bail. So that means that you can pop a threading material through. Let me just grab a pin that I've got for weaving. It will go through in that direction. If you make the aperture in the same orientation, it works okay on ribbon, but it won't sit quite as nicely. So what we're going to do now is add in the next part of the design, which is the beads circling around the edge. So you'll want the wire, it doesn't matter if it's going left or right, it's whichever way makes you happy. Thank you very much for your kindness, Rachel. Thank you for joining us today. You just need to have it going in one direction. Doesn't matter which side it is. I'm just going to give that a very gentle squeeze to make it flatter. Please, please, please be cautious of all of your gemstones, even a nice sturdy gem like agate. I'm then going to give this a really good straighten out to the side. Now you might wonder why I'm making it straight when it was almost swooshing around, as we will want it to in a moment. Well, that's so I can get all of the beads on that I want to work with. So if I just scooch that up to one side, we're going to pick some beads, and I think I might replicate the order or just play with it slightly. Now let's go for the same order. So I've got one of the avocado tones, I've got one of the slightly more feisty, almost Amazonite tone beads. I'm then going to go for one of the smaller rhinestone clustered beads. There we go, these do actually have a direction. And then we'll return to another one of the, wouldn't it be fun if avocados were shiny like this? I do like a nice avocado now and again. What's up next? Oh, it's the other of the smaller rhinestone clustered beads. Pop that into position, and then we'll go for, what's up next? A little bit of an Amazonite colour one, and then we're finishing off with the last beautiful, saucy, shiny avocado shape. And I'm just going to draw those down just to make sure that they're already on the wire as I start shaping it. Now, one thing that will happen is these beads have got really good apertures. They will spin freely. So what I'm going to do is just draw them back up a little bit, warm that wire, give it a really good warm, because I want it to do a special magic for you now, which is this. I just want it to very carefully swoosh around, and I'm giving it a shake because that allows the beads to sit where they need to sit. So what you can see, because we warmed that wire, we've got a really gorgeous organic shape. And there's a little bit of naked wire at one end and the other, just to allow the wire to sit neatly into the design. If you absolutely packed the beads on or made a smaller arc, it would interfere with the main feature beads. So we want that to sit slightly away, like so. And then what we're going to do is wrap the long tail of wire once around the neck of the design where the wire came up and through that agate bead. So I'm going to draw that up and around. And you can see it's just coming over the surface of the preceding wrap. You don't need to work on leaving or guessing spaces. We haven't made it so complicated that people aren't able to replicate it. We've made it so that everybody can have a go. So I've set my side beads into position. So what we want to finish off now with is a little bar that goes over the surface of the agate. Now, if you didn't want to add that bar, then there will be a small amount of movement in your agate. It will spin one way but not the other, because the avocado toned beads will stop it from moving. What this section of wire will do is hold it in position. You may decide that you want that little bit of movement. If that's the case for you, you can turn a short coil just here, trim to about 1 inch, make a short coil, and then pop it over the surface just here. I'm going to show you how to do that at the other end of the agate in just a moment. So if you want to finish the design without that little rib going up the centre, just hold on for a second and I'll show you that technique at the other end. So again, I want the wire to be quite fancy and I want it to be really organic and swooshy and not too, as I said earlier, janky is a local colloquialism. It's not probably even a real word. Never mind, eh? So let's get that nice and warm. And again, I'm just going to put my thumb over this section just here. It's not to hide what's happening, it is to support and protect the beads. So I'm going to draw the tail of wire over the surface, and you get this beautiful, by using your thumb, you've warmed the wire, so therefore the wire is fluid. You pop your thumb into this position, and it's using the pinch of your thumb on the surface like so to get that gorgeous organic swoosh. Now you could have it rippling backwards and forwards as many times as you want, or you could just do what I'm doing, which is a bit of an S shape. Els says, I love it. I've never tried wire before, but definitely will now. It looks so unique. Thank you so much. That's really very, very kind of you. Dank je wel. Or merci beaucoup. I don't know what part of Belgium you are in, and if I even manage to get anywhere close to what I'm supposed to be saying. It's always a question. I'm not terribly good at languages either. So what we're going to do is create another swoosh coming back in the other direction. So we're using the same kind of technique. A little bit of heat into the wire. Press your thumb down onto the surface of that agate. Carefully draw the wire, and I'm giving it a wiggle on purpose because I want it to move organically. I want to have a nice smooth flow to my designs, and that action really does help you get control. What we're going to do now is wrap the tail of the wire around the neck up at the top of the design, and in wrapping around, what can happen again, as I mentioned earlier, is that this section of wire becomes shorter because you pull it. So at this stage I'm going to pinch very firmly like so and draw the tail. So first of all it comes out at an angle. If I pop it in its final orientation it will make sense. It's coming out sideways, so it's kind of heading off towards 3 o'clock if that's a clock face. If I pinch that swoosh into position, making sure I'm happy with how that looks. I really like this design. I like that the swooshes replicate each other. So I'm pinching the top of that swoosh, and then I'm drawing that tail of wire around a couple of times. Now you can, if you want to, really try and stack the wire in to the gap that you have available. I'm not overly worried. I've got 2 passes of wire around. I'm just going to tighten that up slightly. Please be conscientious of your gemstones. What I'm going to do now is heat that end section of wire by running it between thumb and forefinger again. You will feel at this stage the wire is starting to harden up, and that's because we've asked it to do quite a lot. Every time you make a bend on the wire, the work hardening travels further along than you even think it might. So you may think, oh, well, there's lots of pressure here. That's where all the work hardening's happening, where we've done all that coiling. Well, the hardening travels along the line of wire. I'm not a scientist. I won't explain it in layman's terms because I'm not sure I truly understand the proper terminology. What I am going to do is trim to 1 inch. So the distance between the neck of the bale and where I'm about to cut is approximately 1 inch. So I'm just going to hold that. And we've got a small amount of wire left over. We started with about 15 inches. That is enough to make a little coil, which I can add on to something later. They make lovely counterbalances for extender chains. Now we are going to grab hold of those round nose pliers. What I tend to do when I'm making a coil that's going to sit over the surface of a gemstone is create the coil at 90 degrees. So I'm going to show you how to do that now and explain why as I go. So we're going to use the end of the pliers and the end of the wire together. I'm going to start rotating that around so we've got a little crook shape to begin with. I'll do that stage by stage today, I think. So then we move to a slightly round shape. I'm going to use one more time with the round nose pliers. We're starting to move onwards. So the idea is that we're coiling in ever increasing circles. What I want to do now is take that circular form that we've created and push it into this section of the wire. So if I grip hold of that circular form and push it into that, you can see we're tightening as we go. So the coil is growing. Hi Osgul, how are you today? I hope you're having a good day. Pushing, and we're only doing somewhere between a 1/8 and 1/4 of a turn at a time. If you try to speed run your wire work, it tends to not be as smooth as it possibly could be. Hello from England. Hello to you from England. I'm going to continue until this coil sits over the front of the gemstone. Like so, and it's still sticking out at a bit of an angle at the moment. You have a choice now in so much as you could push the coil up to cover part of the bail that you've created, or you can draw it down as I am going to do. So I'm just taking that between the flat surfaces of my pliers and bringing it down over the surface of the gem. It's a little bit elevated, so I will want to press that down, but because I want to preserve the integrity of my crystals and my gemstones, I'm going to do that with my thumb. So that is the basics of your bead strand called Across the Pond. We do have some beads left over, so I'm going to show you how to make an earring to match in with your design. Let me just grab one that I prepared earlier. It's a very simple design. We are going to replicate the leaf where we started down at the bottom, and then we're going to finish up with a simple wrapped loop at the top. And instead of having an agate on that central column or that central core wire, we're just going to add in a couple of those bead caps. So let me just pop that down for a second, and let's go back to find some more 18 gauge round. Susan, you're very kind. Thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it. So I'm looking to use around about 4.5 inches of wire. We will probably be cutting some of that away, but it is always much easier to have a little bit cut away than not have quite enough and have to discard your design. It's very sad when you get to here and you think, well, actually it would have looked great with a coil, but I've had to really just hurry it and it's barely held together. So I'm always happy to see a scrap pot full of bits and bobs that I can use again later, rather than designs that I then have to start all over from the very beginning. So we've got 4.5 inches of 18 gauge. This is a medium temper German style round silver that I've created a demonstration piece in. Let me pop them on the dish so you can see them. And I'll just pop that up to the corner for a moment. Hopefully I've still got enough room to work. Let's pop these up to the top. Perfect. What we're going to do then is start about halfway along that 4.5 inches, so approximately 2.25 inches from one end. I'm going to create an angle out to one side. I'm going to use the heat and warmth of my thumb to create a very small lemon shape. Now you can see that it is possible when you're heating a soft raw copper to put the bends in primarily with your fingers, whereas with the silver coated medium temper you will need the pliers to just go like so, a little bit of an angle, pop those pliers in, draw the wire back on itself. I've made this overly large, so we're not going to have a very big swoosh to work with. You'll need to make this slightly smaller, but if I make it too tiny, you won't be able to see what's going on. So I've made the second side of that funky little lemon or leaf shape. We're going to speed run through this because I've already shown you how to do it. This is another way that you can preserve that second side of wire, the one that tends to get pulled into the neck wrapping. So I'm going to hold the wire with my bent chain nose pliers, draw that tail all the way round and across the back. And you can see that we've done that little loop section again. Lisa says, I have a difficult time starting the round centre of a coil. It always comes out like an oval. If only it came out like an opal, that would be fabulous. Any tips? I will show you another coil at the end of today's tutorial. It won't be on here, but I will definitely do some coiling for you. Slowing it down is the answer. So I've made the little lemon shape. I'm just going to draw that tail around. So we've got a tiny little 1 and a bit wraps. We do need to put just a tiniest bit of warmth into this small tail of wire that we're working with. If you're here at this stage and you've got a small amount of wire and you struggle, you can still heat that wire, grab your pliers and generate that smooth little arc. So you can usually get away with it if there's a tiny bit of wire. I'm going to then use my round nose pliers to just turn that end over and around, so that the small section sits deep inside the centre of that leaf type shape design. Again, take your time to make sure that the cut end of the wire sits flush to the swoosh immediately before it. Let me get the light on that, because this is going to be a risk if it's worn in the ear of catching on hair, scarves, clothes, etc. And then you're just going to give everything a little bit of a strengthen and a straighten. And then we're going to find what bead order we want to use. So I'm going to replicate the design I made earlier, which uses both a washer and a bead cap at either end of that fabulous faceted. I can't get the little washer out of the bowl. How very naughty. There it is. There's the other washer. I might go in with my pliers actually. It's like being a surgeon sometimes. Come on. There we go, and then there's another bead cap in there. Perfect. So what we're actually doing is doubling up on the bead caps, and I think it gives a lovely frilled effect, and it will show up nicely on the copper. So I'm going in with the washer first, and then invert side of the bead cap. Pop the bead into position, bead cap, and then the washer up at the top. Bring that down. Now with earrings, if you don't have enough wire to generate a wrapped loop up at the top, because there's not a huge amount of weight here, and also you shouldn't really have small children or dogs hanging off this piece of jewellery, it will be very painful. You don't need to have a wrapped loop, you can simply go for an open and closable simple loop. So because I showed you a wrapped loop up at the top here, I'm going to show you an open and closable loop this time instead. So I'm going to bring the pliers flush up against the washer or the disc. I've got my little leaf shape is at 90 degrees to the desk, and I'm going to push the wire at the top away at a 90-degree differential to the leaf shape. So it's flush to the desk if the leaf is sideways, upwards from the desk if the leaf is flat to the desk. So if we then use our round nose pliers, I'm just going to roll those around a couple of times, draw the tail underneath, and we've made a simple circular shape. What I want to do is to have that sitting at the end of that core wire really neatly. I'm then going to trim away the excess, and obviously I would make these 2 at a time. I quite fancy, oh, that's another piece of wire that's gone into the foot risk zone. I need to make sure that the end of that loop closes to where the angle is. Just there. So I'm going to open and close my pliers over that shape once I'm happy with it several times. What I'm doing here is I'm strengthening that wire. I'm actually pressing very, very firmly. If you struggle with closing your pliers firmly, you can use the desk to help you. So I'm going to put one hand on the pliers and the other side of the pliers on the desk. Insert the loop between those plier faces, and I can press down now and I can exert a lot more force. Do please proceed with caution that they don't slip and you stab yourself with the tips of the pliers. That would be sad. But if you do have good strength in your hands, then the simple way is to just open and close the pliers over them. Becky's in a bit late. Don't you worry, Treacle. We are on replay. You can watch us here on Facebook today on replay. You can catch us on the blog at jessiejames.com. Sorry, I beg your pardon, jessiejamesbeads.com. How very naughty. You can also catch us in a couple of days on YouTube as well. So there is always the information there. The videos are stored forever and ever and ever. So that is your earring tutorial to match in with your pendant design. Now, it was Lisa who was asking about starting a coil. So I'm going to grab in some 18 gauge wire. It's probably the wire I coil the most. I've got a good couple of inches here to start with. So we're going to have a little bit of a bonus to go with our pendant and earring designs. And this is going to be a little bit of a how-to with your coiling. So this is a rough end. I always want to start with a flush cut. So that's the first thing. Starting with a flush cut will really help you. Little bit of warmth into the design, doesn't need to be too floppy, but just 2 or 3 times over the top, and that's nice and toasty. I use the very end of my round nose pliers. Now what will happen, because I use the very end of my round nose pliers, is at least 50% of the time I go to grip the end of the pliers and I go to grip the end of the wire with the pliers, and the pliers simply slip off. You know you're doing it right if that happens, okay? We're using very close to the end of our round nose pliers. These come to quite a small taper, and we're right at the end of that wire. What we're going to do is turn very, very slowly. Don't rush it. So we've got a little bit of a funky L shape to begin with. Pop the pliers back in, and we're going to turn it around again, and I'm pulling in this direction with my non-dominant hand to help. What you can end up doing is trying to do all the work with one hand. That may be an issue. If you try to do all the work with your pliers hand or all the work with your non-pliers hand, it doesn't actually help. try to do a little bit of the manoeuvring with both hands. So again, I'm turning the pliers around slowly, but I'm also drawing the wire with my non-dominant hand. And you can see that we've got a reasonable shape to begin with. The next key step in creating your coil is when we're taking this from a circular shape with a tail coming away. What I tend to do is I grip the circular shape with my flat facing pliers. These are my bent chain nose. So I'm going to grip that circular shape and I'm going to push into the forefinger of my non-dominant hand. If I move the coil out of the way, if I move the pliers out of the way, I'm pushing in this direction. So let's just grab the pliers and the wire again. And I'm also rotating with my pliers hand, so I'm kind of doing this scooching movement. So let's grab hold of that loopy shape and push that into my non-dominant forefinger, and it will start to coil around the outside of that first loop we made. It is not a quick process if you want it to be neat. The more you practice, the quicker you can get at it, but people quite often fail to just take the time that is necessary. So please do not feel that there is any rush in creating your coils. If you want beautiful coils, take an extra second or two and you can make really quite large coils. So I'm just going to keep going until you tell me to shush and go home. I am home, I'm in my studio, you know what I mean. So I'm going to make a very elongated coil, and what you'll see is I'm not rushing at all. I'm pushing into the forefinger of my non-dominant hand, and I'm using a very small rotating motion, and as the coil gets larger, the movement is getting a smaller percentage of that coil shape. So if we continue all the way to the end of that piece of wire, what I would probably do if I just wanted to have coil is I would cut that end section away. I caught it with the end of my finger because that's quite a dangerous size piece of wire, but that is your best way to get a neat coil. Let's just pop back up. Oh, my mouse has gone to sleep. Let's pop back up here. So let's have a look at what the design will look like on the neckline. So that's the across the pond pendant that we made today. As I mentioned at the head of today's tutorial, I used to really struggle with asymmetric designs, and now I love them because it gives me a whole different dimension to work with. In terms of earrings, you can match up with your metal colour. Mini leaves. If you haven't already checked out the extra beads selection, we had some of these Beads of Courage collections left from the Beads and Blooms that was at the beginning of May. But there's your earrings to go with. If you wanted to add a bit of chain, there's a loop down at the base of the pendant, which you can open and close. Just give it a really good mash with those flat facing pliers and it will be nice and strong. Now this isn't a heavy piece of, gosh I can't word today, it's not a heavy piece of chain, and it adds a really nice detail to the design. So it's just another option of things you might want to do with your across the pond bead strand. Now it's available both in the United States at jessiejamesbeads.com. It's available through Europe and the UK at jessiejamesbeadsuk.com. So the links have been popped into the video demonstration tutorial. Words are failing me now. The description, that's the word I was after. The video description will give you links to get your very own across the pond bead strand. I will be back with you, I believe next weekend might be a holiday weekend, so it could be a random time for the video next week. The week after that I will be back with you live at noon Eastern. And that's 5 PM in the UK if you fancy joining me again. I am Gem Hawkes for Jessie James Beads. Have yourself a lovely rest of your Saturday. I understand it's quite early in parts of the States. We're heading towards gin o'clock in England, so that's where I'm headed. Thank you ever so much for joining me today and for all of your kindness. Becky says it's very pretty. Donna says it's pretty. Catherine says it's very nice. Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining me. Have yourselves a beautiful weekend, and I will look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye!